What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Pack-A-Day Members Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being members. Excited to get to all of your wonderful questions. Hope you guys are having a wonderful December. It's been a fun few weeks in Packers land with 3 consecutive victories and trying to make it 4 consecutive victories this week against the Chicago Bears. And we kick off in a perfect way with that, with Most Hated Chicago, and saying, good morning, Andy. So much pride in Chicagoland this week. Everyone was proudly wearing their Chicago Bears gear. It'd be nice if I can go to work on Monday and soak in their misery and excuses. Go Pack, go. Well, Most Hated Chicagoan, the Green Bay Packers and the NFL as a whole have collectively shut up Minnesota Vikings fans. Check. The Green Bay Packers have shut up Detroit Lions fans. Check. One more on the list to go. Chicago Bears fans, the most insufferable of them all. At least arguably. We'll see if they can get the job done. If the Packers can hopefully pick up that win, break their winning streak, and break the hearts of Chicago Bears fans everywhere. 2 games in the next 3 weeks, regardless of what happens this week. The next game coming up in a couple weeks, and what happens in the playoffs for both of these teams, assuming they both make it, will go a long way in defining things as well. But could go a long way. Bears fans never shut up, no matter what. So, even then they'll have some sort of excuse of like, oh, remember that penalty in the third quarter. But hopefully Green Bay can pick up the win, and it will, help to serve your cause and our cause as much as possible, and bringing some sanity back to Bears fans a little bit. That would certainly be the ideal. All right, Mirko. Hi, Andy. Besides Jordan and Micah, who are the cornerstones of this franchise for the foreseeable future? It's a really good question, Mirko. If you're talking true like cornerstones, it's probably Jordan and Micah, right? I would say Zach Tom with his contract extension. Tucker Kraft, despite the injury, I would still put as a cornerstone of this franchise. He's going to get a big extension in the offseason. I would get pretty close to putting Evan Williams in that conversation, if I'm being honest. But those are probably the key ones right now. Everything else is a little bit more up for grabs, like Xavier McKinney. How much longer, will they give him what will amount to McKinney's 3rd contract? That'll be interesting as kind of the years go on. Same thing with Josh Jacobs. They might see this contract through and then kind of move on after that. Trying to think of like who else would be in that. Like everything on the offensive line is pretty in flux besides Zach Tom right now. Same with wide receiver. We don't know where they're going to stand on some, bringing some of these wide receivers back. Wyatt's got 1 year left on his deal, and then that gets interesting. Same with LVN. Quay has an interesting decision this offseason. Edgerrin Cooper would probably be another one I would put in that conversation. So Bullard could be in that conversation. Valentine could be in that conversation. But if it's me right now, I would probably say Evan Williams. I would probably say, Micah Parsons, and then Edgerrin Cooper on defense with Zach Tom, Tucker Kraft, Jordan Love on offense. I would say those would be the ones that I would feel a little bit more confident in right now, saying are kind of long-term cornerstones of this team. A nerdy one from Mirko. How does Lucas Aversick get paid? He played in games, was on the 53, but a healthy scratch, and now is on the practice squad. So how it works is you have your salary, and if you're on the active 53-man roster, you get a prorated portion of your salary. So if you would sign, like Haversick probably signed like a 1 year, like $900,000 deal, somewhere in that regard, but it would be prorated, through just whatever the 4 weeks that he was on the season. If he's inactive, it doesn't matter. He's on the active, so he gets paid for that. So probably like 4/17 of 900,000 for his time on the active roster, however many weeks he was on it. I forget, it was 4 or 5 or whatever it ended up being, but however many weeks he was on the active roster, he gets that prorated amount of his active game day salary. And then for the practice squad, it's the same exact thing. So however many weeks he's on the practice squad, he gets a prorated yearly salary of a practice squad salary, which in 2025 is between, I don't think he'd have vested veteran status. So I think it's $234,000 for the year. So again, however many weeks he ends up on the actual practice squad, he'd get a prorated portion of that $234,000 that he would get paid. If you're a veteran on the practice squad, you can get up to $396,000. So it just depends, but that's how it would work. Prorated portion. And if he's not on a team, he's obviously not getting any salary at that point in time. If he would have gotten any signing bonus, which he didn't, but if he would have gotten any signing bonus, then that gets paid out up front, just like a signing bonus in real life, right? You sign a signing bonus, that's paid to you right away when you sign. But he didn't have any signing bonus. Paul and Ziggy were speculating whether Justin Jefferson could demand a trade next offseason. What would a trade package look like for JJ? Something similar to Micah or even more than that? I would think that it's in the Micah, if not even maybe a little bit more. That's not saying Micah that JJ should go for more than Micah. I just think Green Bay got a little bit of a steal, especially as you see the deals for Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner over the last few weeks at the trade deadline. I mean, if Sauce is going for what, 2 firsts and a player, Jefferson has more value than that. So, 2 picks, a player, and maybe I would say like 2 firsts, a player like an Adonai Mitchell or a Kenny Clark or whatever has kind of been traded in those sort of trades. And then I would say probably like a 3rd round pick on top of it, if I'm being honest. I think that would be somewhere around the going rate for Jefferson, especially because he doesn't, he signed the contract already, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure he did. So Minnesota is going to pay all the salary cap hit or the signing bonus hits, and it's going to make it a much more palatable deal for the acquiring team in a pretty significant way. So yeah, I would say that it would be a pretty exorbitant cost. If you're looking at it from a Packers standpoint, you can disregard it from all angles. There's no way Minnesota would trade Justin Jefferson to Green Bay, and Green Bay doesn't have the draft capital to obviously be able to trade for him because of the Micah Parsons trade. Bears are frauds, Packers by double digits. We'll see, Ethan. We will see. I hope you're right. Who does Green Bay cut to get all these guys back? Oliver takes Wyatt's spot. Reed takes Shepard's spot. Whose spot does Lloyd take? Whose spot does Cox take? Talked about this a little bit on today's show, Ethan. The first thing that you need to know is that there is no guarantee that these 3 players all make it to the active roster. In fact, if I were a betting man, I would say that the odds that all 3 make it back to the 53 are probably pretty slim. I gave examples recently of Willie Lampkin in Philadelphia, who did not make it back to the 53 after his 21-day window was open and reverted back to IR. Same thing with Corey Trice in Pittsburgh. So just because they get that 3-week window activated, it does not necessarily mean that they're going to make it to the 53-man roster and could easily revert back to injured reserve, especially with kind of the fringe nature of where I would kind of put all 3 of those players at the moment. And if you're just looking at the roster math, right? Reed takes Shepard's spot. That's easy. Devontae Wyatt goes on IR. I think the first question, and maybe we find out this today, is does Green Bay want another defensive tackle? And if they do, if they want to sign somebody off of a different practice squad or sign a free agent to the active roster, well, then that's going to take Wyatt's spot. Otherwise, if they only go with 4, then yes, you have one of your spots for one of those 3 players. With Cox and Oliver, where it gets interesting is depending on when LVN comes back, you have Gary, LVN, Parsons, Enigbare, Baron Sorrell, Aaron Mosby, Bretton Cox, and Colin Oliver. You can't go with 8 defensive ends. You just can't do it. That's too many of the 53 for one defensive end position. So you either need, does LVN go on IR and sit out 4 weeks to open up a spot like that? That's a possibility. It could be that Mosby gets cut, but Mosby's a core special teamer. And he's one of the very core special teamers. Now they could put Mosby on the practice squad. I don't know. I think he's out of elevations, right? So even that might not be an option. So it gets really, really tricky at defensive end where you might open up the window for Cox and Oliver, but unless there's a spot that opens up that's logical, they might be on the outside looking in, or maybe at best only one of those 2 gets activated. And I'd probably put Bretton Cox as the better option over Oliver at this point because Oliver had no OTAs, no mini camp, no training camp. He's literally practicing as a Green Bay Packer for the first time tomorrow. That's his first time practicing in the NFL. He's never practiced in the NFL. So to think that a 3-week ramp up coming off of injury and as a rookie that he's just going to be ready to go, if I had to bet, I would bet that that Colin Oliver reverts back to IR at the end of this. They gave him 3 weeks to practice. They didn't have the open roster spot, put him back on IR, and that this ends up just being a redshirt season for Colin Oliver. I bet Cox, ultimately, if they don't sign a defensive tackle, gets that Devontae Wyatt spot. Reed gets Shepard's spot, and then Marshawn Lloyd's the interesting one. And I think that they would probably at that point release Malik Heath, or maybe I would say probably Malik Heath to get Marshawn Lloyd on the active roster at that point. Even if Lloyd gets to that point, I just talked about this with Paul Brettel for tomorrow's show, is even if he makes it to the 53, it's really difficult to roster 4 active running backs on the game day 48-man roster. And so we know Jacobs is going to take one of those spots. Chris Brooks acts as their primary blocking back, and both in pass protection and at sometimes almost like a pseudo fullback in certain formations, and gives them some stuff on special teams as well, where Lloyd really does not unless they make him the kick returner, which is possible. And then, Emmanuel Wilson has really earned that backup running back spot. Even if Lloyd makes it back to the 53, there's a chance that he's just inactive on game days as well. So I'm as stoked as anybody that these 3 are back practicing, and it gives Green Bay some options over the next 3 weeks. But you could end up in a world where, again, Cox takes Wyatt's spot, Reed takes Shepard's spot, Oliver reverts back to IR, and you bring back Marshawn Lloyd, and he probably takes like Malik Heath's spot. But Lloyd stays inactive on game days. And then even Brenton Cox, by the way, in that scenario, you're probably choosing between Brenton Cox and Barron Sorrell for who you want active on game days. And Sorrell plays teams and Cox does not. So even Cox could easily be a healthy scratch in those scenarios as well. So I'm excited they're back, but I'm remaining cautiously optimistic that, or maybe just looking at it where anything you get from those 3 at this point from an active roster standpoint is it might just end up being a bonus. And if I were willing to bet, I bet all 3 do not end up back on the 53 at the end of this thing. Green Bay does not extend Enigbare. It'll be disappointing. He's been truly really solid this season with a lack of offseason resources. No way he costs an insane amount. Bring him back on a 1 or 2 year deal. I guess I would disagree with that last part. Or maybe I just misunderstand, Ethan, I don't know what you mean of lack of offseason resources. Oh, I'm assuming you're meaning from like a Packer standpoint, right? That they don't have a lot of resources. I think their lack of resources is going to hurt them more than help them in a quest to bring back Enigbare. Defensive ends, pass rushers are really difficult to find. Enigbare in the open market gets paid way more than Green Bay would probably be willing to offer him, would be my guess. So if you can get him tied up before that, go for it. But you've already paid Micah. We'll see what they do with Rashawn Gary. You've got LVN as a first-round pick that you're going to have to make a contract decision on as well, or at least a 5th-year option decision, right? And then, which I bet they pick up his 5th-year option. I'd be pretty surprised if they don't. And then you already have Barron Sorrell and Colin Oliver. When you draft Barron Sorrell, Colin Oliver already, and you kind of have Brenton Cox as well, that's your post Kingsley and Enigbare free agency plan. It's the same thing as Savion Williams and Matthew Golden being the post Romeo Doubs plan, right? Like they are getting ahead of that stuff, knowing that they probably don't have the money to bring back Doubs, probably don't have the money to bring back, Kingsley Enigbare. So I mean, my guess is Enigbare's gone, and my guess is he gets a pretty solid contract on the open market. If I'm wrong, awesome. He's been playing good football, and he's kind of peaking at the right time here. I think a lot of what happens over the next 5 or 6, if like all of a sudden Enigbare like really makes a big time impact the rest of the season, it's kind of a double-edged sword because his value goes up, but maybe Green Bay's like, hey, we can't lose this guy. But as of right now, my guess would be that Enigbare ends up elsewhere in 2026. What year of Aaron Rodgers is most comparable to the way Jordan Love is currently playing? That's a really interesting question. Trav makes beats. That's a really interesting question. I don't know that off the top of my head, and even with a quick cursory glance, that I'm going to be able to answer this. So Jordan Love right now, he is at, where are we at? 67% completion percentage. He's probably on pace for about 3,500 yards, and probably like high 20s in touchdowns and like 6 interceptions, 5-6 interceptions, something like that. So what did I say? 67% completion percentage, high 20s in touchdowns. I think what people aren't realizing too, I don't even know if I would have realized this, is that Aaron's career in Green Bay, he was a 65.3% completion percentage player, and Jordan's at 67%, and he's at 64.4% in his career. Like, that's really, really crazy. This is a really tough question to answer. I'm gonna. That doesn't even totally check out. Maybe 2009. Maybe 2009. 11-5 for the Packers that season. Aaron completed 64.7% of his passes. Now he had 4,400 yards, so more, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 5.5% touchdown percentage. Jordan's got 5.3%. He had a 1.3% interception percentage. Jordan's at 0.8%. He had a 50.8% success rate. Aaron had a 47.4. It's fairly similar to 2009, excuse me. But there's not I don't think there's a perfect 1-for-1 correlation. But I will just argue that like Jordan's overall play is pretty comparable to like, Aaron had more yardage and more touchdowns than probably what Jordan's going to get, but the numbers are really ridiculous, especially when you look at the completion percentage as well. The bottom line is Jordan's playing amazing and really deserves a lot of credit for playing as amazing as he is. Good morning, Andy. Love the content and your work you put in. Do you think it's too late to implement Lloyd and Cox in the system for them to play the season? Obviously, we just went over that. Christian, also, thank you so much for becoming an All-Pro member lately. Appreciate that as well. But yeah, we just talked obviously about the Lloyd and Cox situation. Good afternoon, Andy. Are you worried about our interior line going forward with Devontae Wyatt now out for the season? It certainly isn't ideal. I think I'm concerned about it less than what most people are. They survived a couple games without him earlier this year. Although I think they maybe lost a couple of those games, but they got by. I do think Brinson's playing better. I'm hopeful that at some point LVN's going to be able to kick inside again and they get him back at some point. My concern is this. There's nobody like Wyatt on the defensive line that can hold up pretty well against the run and be a good pass rusher. You definitely lose that. And you lose big time depth where now, Colby Wooden's asked to do a very heavy lift at that defensive tackle position. Brinson and Brooks are going to have to rotate. And Brooks, we don't even know where his health status is right now. Hopefully he can come back this week. And then Nasir Stackhouse, you really don't want more than like 8 to 10 snaps for Stackhouse a week. And if all of a sudden you would lose like a Colby Wooden, for example, or even really Brooks or Brinson, but certainly Colby Wooden, you're really in a tough spot on the interior. So I just think your depth is really in question at the moment. That probably is what gives me more hesitation. But I think if they stay healthy and if they can get LVN back, I think they can weather it. And I don't think it's at like the same level of impact as like a Tucker Kraft, for example, but it certainly does not help. Do you think there's any way the Packers bring in someone like Christian Wilkins? Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. The bottom line is that if Christian Wilkins were employable right now, he'd be employed. All right. Unless I see something from Schefter or Rappaport that Wilkins is healthy and ready to go. Remember, there's multiple things at play here. There's a sort of, Wilkins was hurt and he was claiming that he couldn't play. And the Raiders released him saying that he was not able, they thought he could play and he didn't. There was a huge issue there. If all of a sudden he goes and plays, he potentially loses some of that battle to try to get some of the money back from the Raiders that they're claiming he shouldn't get. I don't think Wilkins is going to want to play this year because of that ongoing situation, to be honest. The second thing is he could just be hurt. And because of that, he can't play. That's the other thing. Number 3 is there was some real, I'll just say interesting locker room situations and conduct detrimental to the team. At least that's what the Raiders kind of defined it as, that they'd have to figure that all out as well. The fact that 31 other teams took what's clearly a very talented football player and have said, we're good at a very key position, it tells me that Christian Wilkins is obviously at this moment, whether due to injury or Wilkins not wanting to play, is not employable at the moment. So to me, he's just completely off the radar at this point. If we get the word that, hey, he's employable, he's healthy, he's ready to go, and the Packers want to bring him in, awesome, cool, that sounds fun. Let's hope it works out. But until I see him taking even a visit somewhere, I'm assuming that he's off limits for 2025. This Bears team, I really hate that they found their guy. I was really hoping Johnson would sign with New England. He's a good one. What an amazing group of coaches the NFC North has. Well, John, even if Ben Johnson would have gone to New England, there's a good chance that the Bears end up with Mike Vrabel. And Mike Vrabel's been phenomenal in New England as well. So I think Vrabel and Johnson were in some way, shape, or form probably going to end up in New England and Chicago one way or the other. I think Chicago is probably going to end up with a good coach, a really good coach, one way or the other. I don't like that they potentially found their guy either. I'm still interested in the Caleb situation. I think Caleb is the one that's kind of holding them back actually a little bit at the moment. He's doing some good things too. But if you're looking at what Chicago needs to do to take that next step, I think Caleb needs to take another step. He hasn't yet. If he doesn't, I think that's always going to hold Chicago back a little bit. But they're certainly finding their footing. And if Caleb all of a sudden does take a step, then it's lookout time because they're going to be really freaking good. And we certainly don't want to see that. Curious to know what you've seen on the All-22, Andy, because I really don't think Rashawn is playing anywhere near his price that he's being paid. Yeah, so I've talked about this a decent amount. I'll continue your question here. A lot of players that you look at stats, it may show them worse than what they've actually put on tape, but I feel like Gary's numbers kind of do him justice, but tape looks like a lot of cleanup work. All right, so nuanced conversation. For me, and I have not graded this week yet on defense or on offense, to be honest. I'm running way behind on it, so my apologies for that. I'll get that done hopefully by Thursday for the normal Thursday episode with the grades. But for me, I have Rashawn Gary graded as a plus 2.10 on the season, which puts him just barely behind Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney, and ultimately number 6 on the list. So I've got Micah at plus 9.40, then Evan Williams at plus 4.35, followed by Edgerrin Cooper plus 3.65, and then followed by McKinney at 2.2, Javon Bullard at 2.15. Those are my top 5. And then Gary is right there at number 6 at 2.10. So I have him graded as again, going into this last week against Detroit, I have him graded as the 6th best player on defense and a very solid, overall grade. PFF. Let's do this. Let's see where PFF has him. PFF has him at a 68.2 grade. And what I would consider 6th or 7th on the team. Tyron Hopper is technically ahead, but he is not. He's only at 55 snaps. LVN is technically ahead, but he's at 168 snaps. It depends on if you want to count that or not. But they would basically have him as 6th on the team as well. They have Micah, then McDuffie, then McKinney, then Cooper, then Evan Williams, and then Rashawn Gary. So they have him at 6th, 7th, or 8th, depending on if you want to count Hopper and Van Ness, but they also have what would be, so their average grade is 60. They have them at a 68.2, which again is above average. This is where the nuance kicks in. For me, for example, some of Rashawn Gary's grades in the past. So if you start in 2020, which was kind of his first real playing time, he had a plus 3.25 grade. In 2021, he had a plus 6.20. In 2022, he had a plus 4.40. In 2023, he had a plus 3.10. In 2024, he had the plus 2.1. So very similar to where he's at right now. In fact, exactly where he's at right now. Right now, he has a plus 2.1. PFF, for example, this would be the lowest grade that they've had on him since 2020. Every other year has been better. He's at 38 pressures and 7 sacks. If you look at the tape, a lot of those 7 sacks were cleaning up or not immediate pressures by Rashawn Gary. How I would define it is this way. Rashawn Gary, per myself, my grades, and PFF, their grades, is somewhere between the 6th, 7th, 8th best player, probably closest to 6th best player on this Packers defense so far this year. He is good at football. He is a plus player. He's grading in the positive, in the positive for me. He's grading, at least decently in the positive for PFF as well. The idea that Rashawn Gary is playing poorly or that he's a bad player or that anything like that is patently absurd. All right. However, However, if you're looking at, is the juice worth the squeeze of what you're paying him and what you're expecting out of him, the answer is unequivocally no. He is not getting close to the ROI that you would hope for or expect for what you're paying him at defensive end. Furthermore, it's even, I would say, a step worse than that because you now have Micah Parsons. It's one thing if he's getting those grades, being the one that is double teamed constantly, right? And he's the one that's got to fight through all the chips and the blocks and the double teams and triple teams, and everyone's eyeing Rashawn Gary and saying, hey, we got to make sure he doesn't get to the quarterback. But he's not. Micah is. And Mike is taking all of that pressure and all of the double teams and triple teams, and Rashawn's getting a lot of opportunities to rush one-on-one. And his pass to rush win rate within the first couple seconds is, at least a couple weeks ago, is the lowest in the league for all of like the defensive ends who get significant playing time, right? So to me, good player, helping this team, good in run defense, which I think is going maybe a little bit underappreciated as well. In fact, his PFF grade for run defense is 73.8, which is really good. His pass rush grade is 60.9, which is very much not where you want it for Rashawn Gary. So again, I think he is a helpful player for this team, but not coming anywhere near the value of what you're paying him. And I think that's where the nuanced discussion comes in of like, everyone's just saying like, oh, he sucks, he's bad, he's not helping, he's not doing anything. That's not true. He very much is. But it's not anywhere near the level that you were hoping or expecting going into the season, especially with Micah Parsons on the other side. So that's where I come down on the conversation. Again, PFF and I have him graded pretty similarly. And that's, again, I think that's as simple as I can put it. Good player, not great player. They're paying him like a great player, and he's only a good player. That's where it's kind of at. Tell you something you won't believe. Matt Orsic is number 1 in Pro Bowl votes. That's incredible. Not overall, but at his position. That is pretty amazing. Packers fans show up for their long snapper, I guess. We got to get Daniel Whalen. That's the big one. We got to get Daniel Whalen in that number 1 spot. What year did we did do that. We did do that, Trav. What percentage would you put on Jordan Love winning the MVP? 5%. I think it's very unlikely. But what are his odds right now? MVP odds. All right. So Jordan Love, depending on what site you use, is at plus 1,600. Plus 1,600 is an implied probability of 5.88%. So just off the top of my head, I would have said 5%, and the implied probability is 5.88%. I think that's about exactly right. I think it would take, if Matthew Stafford has a couple more games like he did this past week, and if, Drake May just kind of falls off and hits a wall and all of a sudden starts really struggling, and Jordan just nukes the last 5 games, similar to kind of what he did at the end of 2023, that's your pathway to making this interesting. And like the one thing Jordan has going for him is he leads in a lot of the advanced analytics. And now he just had a huge game on a primetime sort of, Thanksgiving Day performance. So that's fresh in people's minds. If all of a sudden you start, seeing 4 touchdown games over and over, he could absolutely make a run at this. But the margin for error is so thin. And it would take, again, Stafford and May really coming back to earth, and Love going on a nuclear 5-game stretch here. Possible, yes. Likely, again, 5% is where I would kind of put it at. But if he can even be like, if he can finish like top 3 in MVP voting, what like that would be huge. I mean, that again shows you where he's at. And the fact that we're having this discussion with 5 weeks left in the season, and that Jordan's currently tied in third with Dak Prescott for, the MVP award, that he's ahead of Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, etc. Like he's in a good spot. He's in a very good spot. T Nemo 12, thank you so much for becoming a new member. Hope you're enjoying the members Q&A. If you are here and you're not a member, it means you're here after the fact when we open it up to everyone. Make sure to check out those memberships so you can be here live and asking all the questions as well. Where do you see Lloyd sliding in the backfield if he comes back? Yeah, we kind of talked about that. I think Marshawn Lloyd could have a massive impact on this offense if given an opportunity. I really do. I think the more spark that they can get by getting guys the ball in simple plays and having them with some real playmaking ability, it could really, really help. That's where they kind of struggle right now. And I think Lloyd has that ability. I think the difficult thing is he doesn't have any really true NFL game experience. It's so minimal what he did, over a year ago in very minimal playing time. He's not good at pass pro, or at least he wasn't, in his college year, and we haven't seen it in the NFL. And those are the big two things. And now all of a sudden, it's not just coming back from injury, but you got to get up to speed. You have to, get your legs back underneath you, be in shape, all of it. I think it's really hard to just assume he comes in and all of a sudden makes this big impact. And again, it's hard. It's going to be hard for him just to get active on game days, because I don't think there's no way I would be stunned if they cut either Emmanuel Wilson or Chris Brooks to bring him back. And so he's the fourth running back in that scenario. And I don't know if he gets active on game days. Like, he's going to have to really earn that, or there's going to have to be an injury probably somewhere else at running back for him maybe to get that opportunity. I like your idea of not using division winners for seeding. Additionally, it would be fun if they only got a playoff spot if they were above 500. Could have some fun week 18 games. John, I'm glad you brought that up. I kind of love that as well. I kind of think that you should have to be above 500. This is a really hot take by me as well. I kind of don't think that there should be a set amount of playoff teams. That's a really controversial one, but to me, you've got to be above 500. And I would almost just get rid of the conferences then in the playoff seeding for that. So New England, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Houston, Chargers, Broncos are the 7 in the AFC. Cowboys, Eagles, Bears, Packers, Lions, Buccaneers, Panthers, Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers are all above 500. So let me rephrase. I think you should cap it. I think you should cap it at the top 14 teams, or at least 16 would be the very most. So you can't have more than 16, but I think you should have to be above 500. So the cutoff right now, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 would be the Dallas Cowboys. So there's 17 teams that are above 500. The Cowboys would be the 16th team in. And if let's say there was only 14 teams above 500, then the top 2 teams get buys. If there were 10 teams above 500, all right, then again, you have so many buys. You have 6 teams get buys, and the other ones fight for that spot. I kind of like the idea of you have to be above 500 regardless in order to get into the playoffs. Right now, again, the Cowboys would be the 16th team. They'd technically be 17th. If you could do it that way, you would then have a play-in game between the Panthers and the Cowboys, and then you'd kick off the playoffs. I don't think they would do that. So you probably have to cap it at 16, but the max is 16. And if there's not 14 teams, 13 teams, 12 teams that are above 500, sorry, you don't get in, and teams get buys in that opening round of the playoffs. I think that would be a cool way to do it as well. Controversial, I'm sure. Probably doesn't need to be fixed if it's not broken right now. The first part of it, not seeding, you're not using the division winners for the top 4 should not be controversial and should be a very easy fix. McKinney's interesting. I could easily put him in that conversation as well. Again, what we talked about is just, are they going to give him that third, what will ultimately be his third contract, only the second in Green Bay? It's possible, but again, McKinney will be, the first thing I should note is he'll see that, I think he sees that contract through in Green Bay. So yeah, he'll only be 28 at the end of that deal. So yeah, I would put him very much in that conversation as well. They probably get him one more, maybe get him into year 31 in the NFL at his age 31. So probably 3 years past that. Yeah, I would put McKinney very firmly in that cornerstone conversation as well. I know we hate thinking about it, but if Hafley does take a head coaching job, who are some guys on your radar to replace him? Please say Al Harris. Nemo, I have not looked at this. The 2 people in Green Bay that would be very much in that conversation, Derek Ansley and DeMarcus Covington, would both get interviews internally. And then I believe they would really do a full-fledged interview process like they did when they got Hafley to make sure that they're getting the next guy. The one I would really keep an eye on, though, is, and I just want to make sure I got this right, is Christian Parker. If I were willing to bet, if Hafley leaves, I think Christian Parker is your new defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And I think he should be. Former Green Bay Packer, or at least former Green Bay Packers defensive quality control coach, I should say. He's been in Green Bay coaching in the past. He was in the running when they hired Jeff Hafley, and he's now been, over the last 2 years, the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach under Vic Fangio, who's obviously one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL in Philadelphia. He's going to be a defensive coordinator, I would guess, this offseason. He's only 33 years old. He's got an extremely bright future ahead of him. That would be my go-to. If Hafley leaves, Christian Parker is my guy that I'm hiring, no questions asked. But Covington and Ansley will have opportunities in Green Bay, and then they'll do a wide net search again, would be my guess. And my guess is Christian Parker would be one of the top people that they would interview for that spot. And if it's me, that's probably who I'm going with. Let's go to Andy. As Lloyd returns, did we ever get an answer why he's been out for so long? How do you see the running backs? Yeah, we talked about the running backs. We have not had a response on Lloyd. I'm assuming he's just been recovering, and they want him. The big thing for me would be, my guess is that they want him at 100%. Like, no questions asked. They don't want any lingering issues. They don't want him at 95 or 90. They want him full bore, good to go, no risk of re-injury, anything. That's my guess is why it took so long. Kind of crazy that CV couldn't get on the field 6 weeks ago, and now we're talking about possible cornerstone. Not wrong. He's good, but kind of weird. I just think the Packers screwed that one up. He never should have been off the field at any point this year. Simple as that. Never, ever should have been off the field. Was clearly their best cover corner from day one. And I think they just made the mistake on that one. They now have it right, and I don't think he's coming off again. He shouldn't, certainly. Andy, I'm skipping forward a bit, but how much trade value or interest do you think Dobbs and Gary would have due to cap? Would Jacobs also be in that convo? Thank you. Go Pack Go. Dobbs doesn't, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. The only way that you would get trade value is if you franchise tagged him, which there's no chance you do, because Dobbs and his agent do backflips if you franchise tag him, and then he has no value because nobody wants him on a franchise tag deal. So Dobbs has no trade value. It's not a possibility. Gary would, I think, have trade interest. It's close. It's like a 2-year, $41 or 2-year, $42 million deal that the team would take on. I still think that's worth it for a team, but everyone else is watching the same Rashawn Gary that we are right now. And a lot of teams might say, yeah, I don't want a 2-year, $42 million Rashawn Gary. And certainly I'm not wanting a 2-year, $42 million Rashawn Gary and give up draft capital for it. It's close. I think you probably garner a late day 3 pick in return. But if people are thinking you're going to get a first or second or even third for Gary, I think the most, and I mean the absolute most, would be a 4th. And I think it's probably about a 5th round pick. Somewhere in that 4th to 5th round pick range would be my guess. And it could be, if you said, hey, the over under is 4th or 5th, and it's either more or less, I would guess less pretty easily. So I think there is some, but I definitely don't think it's a lot. Jacobs, we talked about Jacobs on the Stay or Leave episode. Kipperoni, if you haven't checked that out, we went through every player that could be staying or could be going. It was released on Sunday this past week. So we went through all of these scenarios with every player. If Jacobs has trade value, it's probably, again, day 3 sort of situation. It's an interesting conversation with him, which I did bring up. I just think there's about a 98 to 99% chance that he's back. It's not a lead pipe lock, but it's pretty damn close. Andy, I think you said earlier in the season that you don't know if Jordan will ever win MVP, but still think he's a great top 10 quarterback-ish. Do you feel that way now? I think he, again, is going to be in the conversation in a lot of years. If I had to bet right now if Jordan Love ever wins an MVP, I would say no, I don't think he ever wins an MVP. I would love to be wrong, would gladly be wrong. But I think he gets in the top 3 to 5 of MVP voting in a lot of seasons. And I think he's going to end up being a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the NFL in a lot of seasons. And I think he's going to give you an opportunity to win a Super Bowl because of his play in a lot of seasons. That's kind of where I would put it. I just think when you have an NFL, and I know some of these aren't playing to the same caliber, but when you've got an NFL and like the way that Drake May is looking right now, obviously you still have Matthew Stafford in the league who's playing incredible, but you've got a Josh Allen, you've got, Joe Burrow, if he can stay healthy for a year ever, is still going to be very much in that conversation. Patrick Mahomes, and you're going to obviously have new up and coming players as well. I just think it's going to be tough, but he'll have opportunities, and it may be close in some years, sincerely. But if I were to bet right now, if he wins an MVP, my bet would be no, but I wouldn't feel super confident about it. And again, there's an opportunity there, although it unlikely, like I said, 5% chance that he could even still do it this year. So either way, I think those are fun conversations. But at the end of the day, you've got a at worst top 7 quarterback in the NFL, and he's crushing it right now. And just be excited, regardless of whether he finishes 1st or 7th in the MVP race. Like, he's a really good quarterback, and he has the potential to lead you to where you want to go. I am surprised that Green Bay hasn't pilfered a defensive tackle from another team's practice squad. I would expect a defensive tackle move today, either to the active or at minimum to the practice squad. I would be pretty stunned if there's not a defensive tackle move today, in large part because we don't know the status of Carl Brooks. Now, maybe they do, and maybe Carl's good to go this week. But if Carl is even questionable, I don't think that you can just go in to this game against Chicago with a trio of Brinson, Stackhouse, and Wooden, and then you're forced to call up James Esther as your 4th defensive tackle in that situation. I can't imagine that they feel comfortable with just that. So no matter what, they have to add somebody to that room, even if it's just on a practice squad, to give you 1 or 2 more. Like, you're going to struggle to get through practices right now with this few of defensive tackles that you have. So I would be pretty stunned if by end of day today, there wasn't at least a practice squad addition at defensive tackle, maybe an active roster addition. We'll see. And the absolute latest, I think, would be tomorrow on Wednesday. But honestly, I was pretty surprised there wasn't one yesterday, if I'm being totally honest. What is your best guess for the 2026 draft pick positions? I know that's like 10 years away. Just curious. This is always really difficult, Drew, because it's not just what Green Bay needs, but you also have to have the player available. Like, Green Bay probably would love a center, right? We've talked about it with Justice Mosqueda. He's done a dive into it already. The center class is not great. They could want to spend a 2nd-round pick on a center, and there might just not be one, right? But I would guess you're going to get at least 2 picks on the offensive line. Quarterback is possible because of Malik Willis, and you're not having a ton of free agent money. I don't think that running back is interesting on what happens with Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson in in restricted free agency. And if they're back or not, could easily add a running back. I would bet that they draft at least 1 wide receiver. I would bet that they draft at least 1 defensive tackle. I would bet that they draft at least 1 corner. So corner, defensive tackle, wide receiver, running back, 2 offensive linemen. That's 6. That would be like my initial guess. 2 offensive linemen, wide receiver, running back, defensive tackle, corner. That would be my initial guess in some order. Those 6. I bet they end up with like 8 picks, though. I bet they trade down in some way and end up with like 8 picks. Can you briefly explain when teams get a compensatory pick? I would package something for Lloyd if, God forbid, he never sees much action. Compensatory picks are based on free agents, unrestricted free agents that leave you in free agency and are signed to a certain amount of money and then would be valued at a compensatory pick. If it's a big time contract, like one of the biggest free agent signings, like Milton Williams was this past year, that's a 3rd-round pick, like around like the 18 to 20 million, I think, is like a 4th-round pick, like 15 million is like a 5th round. And then you get into like 6 to 7 is like a 6th round. And then like even like 3 to 4 million is around like a 7th-round pick. But it caps, I want to say, at like 32 picks or somewhere around there as well. You can only have so many compensatory picks in each draft. However, what you also need to know is if you have a player leaving free agency, unrestricted free agency, but you sign an unrestricted free agent of your own at a similar price, those cancel out. So if you lose Romeo Doubs to a $15 million deal and sign a player to a $15 million deal, you don't get the comp pick for Romeo Doubs. That would cancel itself out. So it would be unrestricted free agents leaving this next year, and then you would get the draft pick in the following draft class, right? So if they leave in 2026 free agency, you would get them in the 2027 draft. So you would expect more picks in 2027. Draft or compensatory players that you could get comp picks for: Rasheed Walker, Romeo Doubs, Quay Walker, Kingsley Enagbare. Who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing one. Sean Ryan. I think those are the top 5. Quarterback, Malik Willis. running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. We went through defensive tackle, defensive end, Inigbare, linebacker, corner, safety. Yeah, those would be the primary 6. The other thing you need to know is that the most comp picks that you can get is 4. So even if 6 qualify, and you don't sign any free agents of your own, and all 6 of those players I just mentioned leave, you can only get 4 comp picks. So that's the other thing you have to be aware of as well. So that's the general gist of it. As far as Marshawn Lloyd goes, Marshawn Lloyd would have to see through his 4-year contract in Green Bay. So he's got all of next year in 2026 and then all of the following year in 2027. And then he'd be a free agent in 2028. If he signed to a contract that was worth like at least $4 or $5 million per year, then he would be valued as a comp pick. And if so, and Green Bay didn't cancel it out by signing a free agent of their own, they could get a comp pick for him in like 2029. But that's a very long ways away. After 2 years, I was ready to label Bryce Young as a bust. I'll take that L on that one. He's firmly in the category of unspectacular starter. Maybe that's still a bust. Probably still a bust given the number 1 overall pick, and maybe not a bust, but just not maybe living up to the expectations. But Bryce Young's career is not defined yet. And we were so happy to label CJ Stroud as like the next great thing after his rookie year. And the last year and a half has not been great for CJ Stroud. And we were all ready to label Bryce Young a bust after the first year and a half. And Bryce Young's playing some decent football. Not great always, but decent, right? These things can go in a variety of different directions. JJ McCarthy, while I think is going to just be a complete and total undeniable bust, his story's not over. I mean, look, Sam Darnold was a unbelievable bust until he is now playing at an unbelievable level in Seattle. Baker Mayfield was a complete and utter bust until he's now playing at a Pro Bowl level in Tampa Bay. Even Matthew Stafford in Detroit probably never lived up to that number 1 pick expectation. He goes to the Rams and he plays at an MVP level and wins a Super Bowl. Like your quarterback career is not defined even in the first 5 or 6 years of your career. It takes a long time, and it can go in a variety of ways. Like we said with CJ Stroud, it can go down. Just because you come out unbelievable in year 1 does not mean that that's how it's going to look. Teams will figure out ways to fluster you. And that's what I've been most impressed about with Jordan is that teams have not found that one singular way. Teams figured it out with Aaron, by the way. Teams figured it out with Aaron. When they lost Jordy to the ACL and they didn't have a deep threat and they could press man and drop a safety into the box and play single high safety and press Green Bay's wide receivers. Part of this was due to the, not having the deep threat that they needed, but Aaron and then kept him in the pocket. He's right. His worst years are still most quarterbacks' best years, but he did not have the same level of MVP success when teams started playing him that way, and Green Bay didn't have a counter for it. So teams are going to figure you out more often than not and figure out what your kryptonite is. We've seen it with Mahomes. People forget Mahomes had 5,000 yards and like 50 touchdowns his rookie year. And now it's been more of a drag these last couple of years. It's just been, it's been difficult at times, even for Mahomes, with flashes of the usual Mahomes brilliance that we see. So it's really difficult to keep that high level play. Even Josh Allen, we've seen have some pretty crappy games this year. So yeah, teams will figure out Drake May. Some teams probably going to figure out something at some point for Jordan Love as well. And then it's how you respond, counter what that thing is. But these quarterbacks, it's a really difficult position. And there's a long, you're going to get a long leeway in the NFL to figure out what you are, and you're going to get opportunities. And you're not defined necessarily by your first few years, and you're going to get opportunities down the road, like we've seen with a lot of these quarterbacks. Daniel Jones was a complete bust. He's having a resurgence in Indianapolis this year. So you just never know with these guys. By the way, which team looked worse versus the Panthers, the Packers, or the Rams? Packers. I think the Packers. The Rams looked worse maybe on defense, but their offense still looked really like they had all the turnovers. I get that. That's maybe a little bit different too, but their offense still looked really potent in that game. I think the Packers were a little bit more listless in their game against Carolina. And I thought Carolina just played a little bit better against the Rams. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They both lost, and Carolina should get a little bit more credit than maybe they deserve. Certainly than they got for beating Green Bay in that game. A lot of really good play from CV. Not a bad thing for him to cover like Dion, but he should not be trying to tackle like Dion. Yeah, I don't think he's as bad of a tackler as Dion, and I certainly don't think he's as good of a cover corner as Dion. But I mean, that is the sort of play that you just have to wrap up, and he's got to clean up and make sure that it doesn't happen. But yeah, he's a really good cover corner, and he's not a great tackler. You know, we talked about it the other day. If you want a great cover corner who's also a great tackler, good luck. There's like 3 of them. Yeah, and no team is going to have 2, and you've got to have, and certainly no team's going to have 3, and you're going to play 3 corners on the field at all time. Every one of them is going to have some level of deficiency. Carrington's is tackling a little bit. Sucks. Keyshawn tackles pretty well. He's nowhere near the cover corner, at least not quite as good of a cover corner as Carrington is. So that's just kind of the situation. And yeah, it's tough to, it's tough to have the perfect corner. I wish they had 3 of them. You're not going to find them. What's up, Andy? What's your play of the year so far this season? Oh, that's a really good question. My favorite might have been the Micah Parsons sack in the first game against Detroit in his first game, where he chases down Jared Goff and the whole crowd is ready to explode before it happens. And then he gets him and the crowd explodes in a key game. In that moment, that might've been my favorite, like at least my favorite moment. I mean, it's tough because it kind of has to be in like a big game, right? So it has to be almost in like one of the Detroit games, because those are your biggest games. I mean, you could say the 4th down completion to Wicks. You could say the touchdown this past week to Wicks, but I don't know. Off the top of my head, I think my favorite play was that Micah sack on week 1, where it's his first game. He's the one that's introduced last out of the tunnel. He gets to celebrate being a Packer. And then you like the anticipation of that sack for Micah chasing down Goff from behind. It was picturesque, perfect. And you couldn't have asked for anything more. And again, the crowd, like you seen him chase him down and almost like on the edge of their seats. And then the sack happens and the whole stadium just erupts. That was probably my favorite. Yeah, we talked about Oliver. Again, if I had to bet right now, I think there's a better chance he just ends up staying on IR even after the 3 weeks. But he's got a long way to go. This is his first practice tomorrow in the NFL. That's asking a lot. Anything you get out of him is basically a bonus at this point. But Packers free agent, do you think will have the best, most impactful 2026 for someone else? Ooh. I guess I would probably say Dobbs. I think Quay ends up staying. So it's 2 offensive linemen, Sean Ryan and, Rashid Walker. I think Malik ends up being a backup. So it's really between Enagbari and Dobbs. And I just think Enagbari probably still ends up being a rotational defensive end. And I think if he ends up having to be a full-time defensive end, I don't think that that's necessarily a role that's perfect for him. And I think Romeo will find a way to be impactful no matter what. So I'll say Romeo Dobbs. Just wanted to pop in and wish everyone a happy holiday season. Let's go beat the Bears. Will, thanks so much for being here, and thanks for the kind words. Thoughts on Belton being our full time? I just talked about this with Paul Brettel. If Belton settles into that spot, there's a good chance that he's at least the starting right guard for this year and the next 3 years while he's under contract in Green Bay. Like, it's really easy for him to potentially settle in there. I think that would probably be my guess, is that he's probably your long-term right guard at the moment. Yoshi, I saw a Packers writer yesterday claim McDuffie is better than Quay and we should let Quay walk because of that. Wanted to get your thoughts on this. In my mind, it's a crazy take. Talked about this with Mike Wall quite a bit on today's show, or at least posed the question to him. Mike and I are both in agreement that Quay's the better linebacker and that they should want Quay back. But it's a really interesting conversation because McDuffie's playing really well. You have Hopper, who's ready to play, quite frankly. And obviously, Edgerrin Cooper's not going anywhere. So the question to me isn't, is McDuffie better than Quay? I don't think he is. But is Hopper, Cooper, and McDuffie good enough to be your trio of linebackers? And then do you need to spend the $15 million per year on Quay Walker? That to me is where it gets more of a nuanced conversation. Mike and I both agreed Quay is the unquestioned starter. Once he comes back, it's not even a conversation. McDuffie slots into that third role at linebacker. And Mike and I are both big time McDuffie guys. So don't get it twisted. We like McDuffie. We just think Quay brings a little bit more to the table. But I do think that the contract in 2026 is more interesting. But you're talking about a team captain, green dot on the helmet. He continues to get better. You do see linebackers kind of take a jump year 4, year 5. We've seen him play, in my opinion, his best football this year so far. I kind of just want the depth and I want the talent. And I think Quay and Cooper have the ability to be a really good tandem for the next 3-4 years together. But it is at least a very interesting question for what you want to do with Quay's contract moving forward. Should the Packers look at replacing some medical staff? No idea, John. Absolutely no idea. I don't think the medical staff has nothing to do with it. I mean, at the end of the day, they can't prevent injuries. The strength and conditioning gets you ready to play and things like that. The medical staff is there to fix your injuries. Yeah, it's impossible to say. It's literally an impossibility to say. And again, even if I've said this before, if I had their medical charts in front of me, I'm not smart enough to interpret whether a player would be. And again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. It is such a gray area. You need players to play hurt. If you don't have players play hurt, you don't have a team. You don't want players to play injured. But the gray area between hurt and injured is so razor thin. And it's really complicated at times. And a lot of times, a team might say, hey, we think you're hurt. We need you to play. And a player saying, no, I'm injured. I can't play. And at other times, the team is saying, you're injured. You can't play. And the player saying, no, I'm hurt. I can play. And there's always a conflict there. And it's never easy. And a lot of times you have to trust the player. And it just gets really, really difficult. And a lot of these guys, it's not a perfect situation. The team clearly wants the player to get back. The player wants to get back 99% of the time. There's always a one-off, but the idea that these players don't want to play in games, it's what these guys have done for a living, and not only for a living, but for fun for their entire life. And that's how they get paid. They're not going to get future contracts if they're not on the field. They don't want to practice always. They don't want to go to film sessions. Most of, like a lot of them at least, right? Like that stuff, yeah. But they want to play in the games. So it's a really difficult, again, nuanced conversation that there's no easy answer to. And this stuff is not just a Green Bay thing. This stuff happens all throughout the league for all 32 teams. And, you see people complaining all the time of like, well, why isn't Marshawn Lloyd practicing, or why isn't he coming back? It could be that Green Bay's being very cautious with bringing him back. It could be that Lloyd's been ready to play for 5-6 weeks and he wants to get out there. The Packers are like, no, we're being cautious with you. We're not going to put you out there again and put you in harm's way. And it could be the reverse on others. It could be, with the Jair situation, it might've been that Jair's like, hey, I can't play. And Green Bay saying like, no, dude, you're cleared. Like, we need you to play. You're under a bazillion-dollar contract and you're our starting corner and we're clearing you. You need to get out there and play. And you're not always going to get those situations right, but to judge it one way or the other without knowing the exact situations, it's an impossibility. Throughout the typical MVP criteria, wins, stats, etc., what players? We talked about this with Mike too. Myles Garrett's the best player in football. There's no question about it. He's the best player in football. Now, they have 3 wins on the season, so he's not the most valuable player. But Myles Garrett's the best player in football. If you want to award the best player in the league, it's Myles Garrett. If you want to do the most valuable, it's probably Drake May. I think that's probably, and Stafford's probably close behind him. To me, the key to this Bears game is Evan Williams. If he can fit the run against that very good Ben Johnson run game, I think Packers can get enough pressure on Caleb. Evan's been great. Hopefully he can continue that this week. They're certainly going to need him to play that way. Also, not sure if you saw, but Caleb had a worse PFF grade than McCarthy the week we played the Vikings and the Bears put 31 on the Steelers. I don't understand. That's Ben Johnson, my friend. That's Ben Johnson. Caleb has low-key been fine. He's very much still a work in progress. And like I said earlier, he's kind of the one that's is the difference between Chicago being a great team and just a really good team right now. And again, if he takes off and plays like the number 1 overall pick, the generational quarterback people expected, look the hell out. But that's still a work in progress for Caleb. I have no idea how Pro Bowl votes are counted. Just electronically would be my guess. It's all voted online, I think. So my guess is just electronically. Very sad we don't get to see Kraft, Reed, Watson, and Golden out on the field together, but happy to see Reed coming back. Yoshi, I'm right there with you. Lloyd would not be a punt returner. Kick returner is in the realm of possibility, yes. I don't think he would at all be in the punt return conversation, but kick returner possibly. He did have fumbling issues in college, big-time fumbling issues in college, so that'd be one thing that you'd want to be a little bit careful with potentially. How big would the 1 seed be? Buy is huge, but I wonder if our team might be better in dome than the snow. I'm not in that camp necessarily. If you could pick, like if you could get, yeah, it's tough because you want the buy. Yeah, you just have one less game you have to go through. If you could somehow get an easy win week 1, but there's not going to be any games easy in the wild card. There just isn't. All these teams are really good. You could end up with San Fran, Seattle. Like you could end up with a really difficult team coming to Green Bay in that wild card game. Like you just don't want that. Philly, Chicago, Detroit. Those are really like you can lose that game. That's a coin flip of a game, like almost no matter what. So I want one less coin flip game, and I'll take the 2 games at home. I'll gladly take the 2 games at home. Could I make an argument that this team is and Jordan is maybe a little bit better in a dome scenario? Sure, but the crowd noise in those situations is really difficult as well. And you could end up having to go to Seattle, right, or Philly, and those are outdoor games where you're also on the road. You're not guaranteed a dome condition. Yes, if you get the Rams, if you get Detroit, but Detroit's not going to host a home game. So, yeah, I mean, you're just hoping to go to the Rams, who's arguably the best team in football. I don't want to go play the Rams in the Rams, and I would rather take the cold or the warm weather team and make them come to Green Bay. So I'll take the home field. I just want to say thanks for all the work. Love the channel. Carson, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate you, and thanks for the membership. Holy cow, we've got a lot of questions left. I'm going to have to go a little bit lightning round here, guys. My apologies for that. Thoughts on the Packers on 3rd down? It's 3rd and 2, and they continue to throw 30-yard passes. Don't understand why even when Golden was healthy, we don't do a slant towards the middle for like 3 yards. We've talked about this a lot. I love the mentality. You've got to be able to generate big plays in the NFL, and you're going to get your best look on those situations to generate a big play. The 4th down play, they hit to Dontavian Wicks in the end zone. That was a 4th and 3, and they go deep to Wicks in the end zone and they convert the touchdown. Those are the best plays to get advantageous looks to throw a shot down the field. Listen, they're not easy to convert, but you know what? Picking up the 1st down and still having 50 yards to go to get a touchdown is not easy to convert 1st down after 1st down after 1st down either. If I'm going to get an advantageous matchup and I got Christian Watson one-on-one on the outside on a 3rd and 2, and I'm going to be able to take that shot to him down the field, and that's going to be my best look I'm going to get on a Christian Watson deep ball all game, hell yeah, sign me the hell up. I'm going to take that shot. Same thing on 4th down. You just have to be able to generate those explosive plays if you want to win in the NFL, and that's usually your best opportunity to do it. A conversion on 3rd down doesn't guarantee you anything other than 4 more downs. Doesn't even guarantee you that. You could turn over the ball in the next play. You could have a holding penalty on the next play that completely derails the drive. If I can get the touchdown right there and now, or get in 50, 60-yard play to get into the red zone, I've got a better chance to actually go down and score that play. And the percentages are probably similar. I don't have it off the top of my head, but your odds of going, 70 yards meticulously, or maybe it's like 50 yards meticulously, or, the odds of completing a one-on-one to Christian Watson when he's got a step and it's an advantageous look, it's probably about a similar percentage. So give me the shot play. I'll take it and let the rest be what it is. Dennis Allen plays a pretty heavy man scheme similar to the Lions scheme that Jordan torched on Thanksgiving. You think he mixes it up? I do think he mixes it up, because I do think he's smart enough to know that that's been effective against Green Bay, but hopefully he doesn't, and Green Bay can take advantage of it the same as they did against Detroit. He has 4.29 speed. Doesn't make sense to me that we, yeah, so we kind of, again, we just talked about the percentages. Again, if you're talking about a 40%, if you're giving me a 40% chance to complete a 40-yard pass or 60% on 4 yards, I'm taking the 40% chance on 40 every single time. Your math is heavily in favor of doing that in that scenario. Heavily in favor. Yeah, so I would just disagree with the thinking there, Spider Monkey. Yes, they're trying to take that away, and they're trying to take that away, and they're giving you that opportunity to take the deep shot. When you get the opportunity, you just have to take those. MVP awards don't convert Super Bowl wins. Nobody knows better than Packers fans. Totally true, Green Bay Gary. Totally true. Want to let you know how much we appreciate you. Hope you don't let the haters get you down. Hope you can either laugh or ignore. For the most part, I can. 99% of the time, I can. And it's fun. And I'm blessed to get to do what I do. I think it's stupid when people like to blame me for the Packers struggles. I think it's cute that they think that I'm that important. I'm not. But yeah, it's normally all in good fun. And again, 99.9% of the time, I get to enjoy the hell out of what I do. Appreciate that though, John. We're projected to get a 7th for Eric Wilson. Pick 255 is what Over the Cap projects. Think we may go for a linebacker instead of wide receiver, 2 offensive linemen, and maybe a top 100 if Quay walks. Maybe could be a possibility. Yes. Also, I should have mentioned part of the comp pick formula is how they play in this year, like how many snaps and the impact on the season as well. There's a little bit of that goes into it. And I think Wilson's amount of snaps and how much he played has catapulted him into a 7th round comp pick. Would Sean Ryan sit by as center with us if he could get the John Runyon deal or more on the open market as guard? I think he probably gets around that John Runyon Jr. deal almost no matter what, like a 3-year 30. And it just, if Green Bay wants to give it to him at center, I think he'd be fine with it. And if he has to go elsewhere to get it and play guard somewhere else, I think he'd be fine with that too. But I haven't talked to Sean, so I have no idea, but that'd be my guess. I have no idea how to feel about Morgan at left tackle in the future, but he's probably going to get the first opportunity to win the job, and hopefully he's up for it. In the one preseason game, he looked good, but he has a ways to go as both a pass protector and a run blocker, but hopefully he can settle in at his natural position that he played in college more. I don't think that they will bring back Walker, though. I think no matter what, they will probably go with Jordan and then bring in some cheaper competition for Jordan Morgan as well, either via the draft or free agency. Do you think we should stack the box against Chicago and let Caleb try to beat us? I am feeling strong. I think they're going to try first to play run defense the way that they've played run defense, which is usually too high safety and Evan Williams and those safeties screaming down into the box when it's a run play because they're really, really good at it. But I think they have the ability to course correct if they need to, and could add that second or add that safety into the box if they ultimately needed to get to that point. Because he's still very much a work in progress. Belton is not anywhere near perfect. He adds a level of physicality, but he had major issues in pass pro this past week, and he really struggled. I used my lowest graded player 2 weeks ago. I haven't graded him yet this week, but I have a feeling he's going to be probably one of my lowest graded players as well this week, just off of what I saw on the TV copy. But you can tell the physicality and demeanor that he plays with. He adds some size and bulk. You can tell he's just settling into the position a little bit. And the hope is that starts to get even just a little bit better over time. And then you've got really something good on your hands. I feel like most passing games are just generally better in domes. So not sure the advantage goes the Packers away in a dome when it is an advantage for both. Give me the home crowd advantage. Yeah, Yoshi, for the most part, I'm in the same boat as you there. All right, friends. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being members. I appreciate you guys a ton. Do have a lot to get to. We got a radio hit coming up at 1, recording with the Farrington boys at 3:15. Then got some soccer practice stuff for the boys after that, and still had to get to all my grades for this week. So plenty on the to-do list. I will see you guys all very, very soon. Double episodes tomorrow. So both Paul Brettel and the Paul Farrington Show, Justice and hopefully grades on Thursday, Carmen and Happy Hour on Friday. We should have a Mike Wall preview and a episode from me on Saturday. And then Sunday, pregame show, live post-game show. And then we'll do it all over again next Monday. So I'll see you guys all very soon. Thanks again for being here. Until next time. And as always, go Pack Go.